Welcome to Nature's Guardians. I'm Micah Siegel. Each week, I talk with people working to save and help animals around the world. They are nature's guardians, and you can become one too. Today, I'm talking with Sarah Conley from the International Elephant Foundation. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Micah. Thanks for having me. I love talking to people about elephants.
I love talking to people about all sorts of animals. What's your background, and how did you get where you are now?
I grew up in Southern California and had the opportunity to work with a herd of Asian elephants as a teenager, doing outreach activities and things in the community. And my passion for elephants and conservation grew from there, which then brought me to the International Elephant Foundation because the people that had that herd of elephants were on the board. And so when I was in college, I was always following IEF in our work. And ultimately, when they were hiring, decided, okay, I'll take a side job doing some work for them. And it grew into an entire career. So for the past decade, I've been helping to guide our conservation projects, represent IEF at international meetings, and expand our online educational outreach and more.
What is important to you?
What's most important to me is that we all work together as a society, as a culture, as a group to preserve our natural heritage. We were given these amazing creatures to share the world with, and it's our responsibility to take care of them so that other generations can marvel and love them as well.
Can you give us the big picture about Indian and or Asian elephants over the last 30 years or so?
Sure. There are three species of elephants, and they're all endangered. So you have the African savanna elephant, the African forest elephant, and the Asian elephant, or some people call it the Indian elephant. But because there are 13 different countries that they can live in and that currently have Asian elephant populations, we call it the Asian elephant. And there are about 40 to 50,000 Asian elephants left in the entire world. From January to July of 2017, nearly 4,000 hectares of forest cover or elephant habitat was lost in Sumatra alone. That's one tiny island where Asian elephants live. There's been 12,000 hectares per year of deforestation in Lesser, another part of Sumatra. So if we're going to protect them, we have to figure out a way to live side by side peacefully and do what's best for them, while also making sure that the communities feel listened to and feel heard.
How many Asian elephants were there 30 years ago?
Good question. So in 1900, there were about 100,000 Asian elephants. In the last 120 years, we've lost half the population or more.
I've seen elephants in shows and tourist attractions. So how are they in captivity?
In Asia, they're about a third of their overall population lives in human care. And that includes elephants that are used for tourist activities, elephants that are used in cultural activities, religious temples, and things like that. And just like any other situation involving animals, some people are really good at their care and some people are not. And it's really difficult to accurately characterize all of them together because we can't really generalize. Some situations, there are different organizations where they do a great job caring for their elephants, and then some where they don't. Responsible tourist activities with elephants can educate the public and can really show people why it's important to protect these elephants, but they need to be done right. So the elephants need to have enough space. They need to have caretakers who are washing them and feeding them and doing everything that is possible to help them. They should be giving birth and being able to breed with each other. So it's important to, if you are going to go to a tourist attraction with elephants, that it's one that's done really well. So there's one place in Thailand that I know of where they've had something like 80 baby elephants born, 80 Asian elephants, endangered species. They're possibly the most successful breeding facility for Asian elephants in the world. That's a really great thing because you have important genetics that are being passed on. At the same time, there are organizations that keep their elephants separated from everywhere else, that only have, one, and they do hard labor, or maybe they do things that are not in that elephant's best interest. It's also important to realize that many of these elephants that live with people couldn't be released back into the wild. They've always lived with people. So they've become habituated to interacting with people, which means if you just abandon them and threw them into the forest to fend for themselves, number one, they would get sick and injured right away. Number two, they wouldn't know how to fend for themselves, and they would probably come into conflict with all the wild elephants if they found wild elephants, because they have a completely different disposition. Number three, these are elephants that, because they're habituated to people, are going to seek out people, which means they're going to go into villages, they're going to go into farms, they're going to raid crops and destroy things. And that's going to create more human-elephant conflict. So even though we would love a world where every elephant ranged free in its habitat, in its ecosystem, that's not a realistic view because there's not that safe habitat for them. And there are so many Asian elephants that live side by side with humans that we have to instead make sure that they live healthily and well and responsibly with humans.
So for tourists who are going to see these places, is there a list of good ones?
As far as I know, there's no list of good ones. I think, especially since there are so many, look at what's available in whatever region you're going to and really ask questions. Really look at their program and use your best judgment, because it's a wonderful thing to meet an elephant in person, but it's also important to make sure that those elephants are taken care of.
What about shows that are about entertainment?
If it's done right, if they have good care and they are fit and the training is done in the right way, it can be a wonderful way to inspire people to love and marvel at elephants. But it must be done correctly.
So overall, do you think tourist attractions are helping elephants or not?
I personally think that seeing an elephant in person inspires people to care. So I think if you have responsible tourist attractions for people to experience an elephant, that it helps elephants.
What about the elephants that are working in forests or construction?
Right here, you can see elephants that are on patrol in Sumatra. They are elephants that used to be in conflict with communities in Sumatra. A bunch of different charities and non-government organizations came in, helped the mahouts and wildlife officers patrol these hotspots. If you patrol these hotspots, you are able to, say, use your trained elephants to herd the wild elephants away from those human settlements. You have now prevented that conflict. So maybe you've saved a farmer's entire year's worth of crops, right? That's a very good thing. So sometimes a working elephant can be a useful tool and a partner in conservation. In a place like Myanmar, they used to have logging elephants, but they ended that practice a number of years ago. Imagine you're one individual guy in, a pair of boots or on a motorbike trying to push an entire herd of elephants away from a community. You can't do that. If those patrol teams are on elephants, those elephants can naturally herd the wild elephants away from human settlements. So your patrol elephants are getting the exercise they need. They're helping you go to places that you wouldn't be able to access, and they're helping their wild cousins stay safe and hopefully stay in habitat as opposed to crop breeding or going into villages.
What can you tell me about poaching in Asia?
Asian elephants are special because even though all elephants are in danger of poaching, in danger of ivory being taken by carvers, and actually big crime syndicates are the main people trafficking in ivory. Only male Asian elephants get the big tusks. So poaching for ivory is really a big problem for African elephants. But poachers will go for Asian elephant ivory as well. Thankfully, it's only the male Asian elephants, and not even all of the male Asian elephants, that get the big tusks. So we're actually, for IEF, we have more projects addressing poaching in Africa.
So tell me more about your organization and what you do.
Sure. The International Elephant Foundation was founded in 1998, and we have supported over 200 projects in 4 continents across 28 countries, over $8 million in direct financial assistance to elephant conservation projects, with over 85% going directly to projects, and in most years, honestly, 90%. We were founded specifically because the people on our board got together and were very frustrated that a lot of elephant charities were not getting enough money to what we call boots on the ground. So that's patrols, community education, stopping human wildlife conflict. We spend 80 to 90% of all donations directly on projects. We specifically run a very skeleton crew to make sure that we have a very low overhead, and we all wear many hats so that we make sure that elephants come first always. IEF has supported things like constructing ranger stations throughout Murchison Falls and Queen Elizabeth National Park in Uganda. We've constructed something like 15 different land and marine ranger stations and taken back those areas from poachers. And because of our support and our partners' support in Uganda, those populations are recovering. We're seeing more elephants born, we're seeing more giraffe born, we're seeing more lions born. So we know that our approach works.
What's overhead?
Oh, good question. I'm sorry, I should have told you. Overhead is what we in the nonprofit world call the percentage of donations that you're spending on salaries, advertisement, administration. So paying sort of fees for different things, the cost of doing business. So we make sure that our overhead stays very, very small, and that means we can buy more boots for rangers. We can buy more airplane fuel so they can patrol aerial surveillance in important parts of elephant habitat and things like that.
So you pretty much give money to groups. How do you choose groups?
We have an annual conservation grant program. So we will put out on our website and social media asking people to bring their projects to us. And no project is too big, no project is too small. We especially like funding grassroots type work where individuals on the ground have tailored a specific solution to their community's needs. And they will go through a grant application process, and we'll select our projects based on that.
Tell me about this whole supply chain between poachers and Asia, or wherever they get sold.
Most ivory is poached in Africa, and there's been a bunch of different changes internationally in ivory sales and laws regarding ivory. In 2016, the United States implemented a near total ban on importing ivory. And other countries like UK and Singapore followed and did their own versions of the laws. So all the laws are slightly different. And that kind of inspired China to ban the sale of ivory in 2017. But their laws had a little bit more cutouts and a little bit more leeway. This didn't mean ivory sales were eliminated. It turns out China is the biggest market for ivory in the world. And so Chinese citizens would end up still buying ivory just outside of China and then illegally import it back into the country. So you have crime syndicates in Africa that are poaching elephants, smuggling those tusks or often pieces of tusks to the different places where maybe they'll get carved or worked into different trinkets and things that tourists can buy. And then they'll filter that into other, mainly Asian countries where Chinese tourists will go buy these items and then bring them back into China. It's a big problem because even though the laws have banned this kind of thing, we haven't changed the minds of the people. So one of the things that IEF supported a couple years ago was a direct public service campaign focusing on travelers throughout Asia about the need to stop buying ivory and why it was important for elephants to stay in their habitat and not be used for ivory. We think that if you educate people about why you shouldn't buy ivory, hopefully that will drive the demand for ivory down, and that will cut off that whole cycle of importation and sales of ivory. At the same time, we have projects with rangers and patrols that are trying to stop the poachers that are killing the elephants to get the ivory and sell in China or sell in Asia. So if you stop the supply of the ivory, that's one hitting the supply chain in one section. And if you stop the demand through education in the other section, hopefully we'll be able to make a measurable impact.
Which groups in China do you support working to reduce the demand?
For that public service campaign that we talked about, we worked with Wild Aid. They have a lot of really great messaging, reaching out to travelers and tourists, trying to educate. They got a fairly prominent Asian celebrity to star in these public service announcements, which was really wonderful. She did a great job. We like working with people like that.
Cool. Do you think that it would work to make ivory legal and just control it?
That's a great question, because that is one of the questions that elephant conservationists have argued about for decades. There are two big camps in elephant conservation. There are the people who think you need to completely eliminate all ivory everywhere, destroy it all, burn it. And then there are people that think, what if you had a sustainable amount of ivory? Because theoretically, you could harvest ivory from an elephant without killing the elephant, right? You could just trim the tusks and use the end. That's not what poachers do. Poachers kill the elephant and cut the entire face and get the whole length of the tusk, which goes all the way back in their mouth. I'm not convinced that encouraging more ivory use through a sustainable crop of ivory will work, because I think there's already too much supply chain in place, too much infrastructure in place for the illegal ivory harvesting. So I think if you had a set amount of trade in ivory that was allowed, you would end up only encouraging more people to poach and then find some way around whatever system you had in place to identify the legal ivory.
Do you want to show us any more slides or tell us anything else?
Sure. So you probably already know this, but I think it's worth covering. Elephants are umbrella species, which means if you protect elephants, that protection serves as an umbrella for that entire habitat. So in this graphic, you can see that protecting an elephant might protect giraffes or cheetahs or lions, or in places like India and Nepal, gharials or tapirs or different kinds of rhino, pangolins. Say you love tigers. You should also want to protect elephants, because protecting an elephant in Asia also protects that habitat for tigers. So we actually have donors who their main focus is Sumatran tigers, and they will support projects that are mainly elephant conservation because they know there is carryover multi-species benefit for the tigers that they love. The lion population in Murchison Falls in Uganda is having a resurgence. because of our elephant protection efforts in that area. If you are protecting an elephant, you are protecting everything from the other mammals in that area to the reptiles to the tiny frogs that make their home in the footprints of elephants as they walk through the forest. I know your audience really cares about how they can get involved in conservation. I loved animals when I was a kid, all different kinds of animals, but I didn't know what I could do. We live in a totally different world now. We live in a world where you get to have a podcast and teach people about animals. That's something that I couldn't have done as a kid. So if kids want to get involved in global conservation, you can do things like follow IEF on social media. You can share our educational posts. You can do things like you're doing and teach your friends about conservation, teach your friends about animals. Little things like sharing memes, changing your consumer behavior, and being a good steward of your environment can make a huge difference in getting involved in conservation.
What do you see for the future of elephants for the next 30 or 20 years?
I hope that we have a bright future for elephants in the next 20, 30, 50 years. I think we are very close to finding a vaccine for a disease called EHV, elephant endotheliotrophic herpes virus, that affects all elephants. And that'll really help elephant populations level off as far as a threat that's not human related. I think we will keep winning the war to protect habitat. I think the more we educate people, the more we work with communities so they understand the importance of elephants thriving and habitat thriving, as well as their communities thriving, especially in Asia where there's so much conflict. I'm optimistic, even though I know there are huge challenges, especially with people like you who are coming up, and you're going to be the next generation of conservationists, and your viewers are going to be the next generation of conservationists. And we're going to be better off than we ever were because we're going to have more people doing the right thing.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for being a nature's guardian.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to help and be here for you.
Thank you for watching, and see you next time on Nature's Guardians.